When Emperor Trajan died in 117 AD, the Roman Empire was vast, stretching from modern Iraq in the east, from Egypt to Morocco in the south, and from the great European river Danube and Rhine to the north. The very northwest of the empire lay the island province of Britannia, with his army spread thinly and continuous fighting against invaders. The new Emperor Hadrian decided enough was enough. An unfinished conquest started nearly a century earlier, but never fully pacified. During that winter, I was dispatched to Mogontiacum to oversee rebuilding of the fort. I never thought my work would lead me to this.
And add a note to make sure the British fleet is fully ready to meet these new requirements. Enter!
Here he is, sir.
Leave us. Come, be seated. I'm afraid my Praetorians can sometimes be a little overzealous in their duties.
My lord, forgive me. If I had known I was to be summoned to your presence,
Not at all. I've had my fill of over-polished soldiers standing to attention. Come, get up. And sit down. So, you were Caius Cabrius, whose grandfather served with Agricola when he was governor of Britannia.
So,
I gather you even joined the fleet when it sailed around the northern reaches of that island. Impressive. And you kept excellent notes, which I hope you brought with you as requested.
yes, I have them here, sir.
Good. Your accent is unusual, not one I've heard before.
My mother was Ottadini, a British tribe in the north. My grandfather settled in their lands near the frontier when he left the legions. My father, he was a merchant, and he advised me to join a Rhine-based legion rather than being stuck in a backwater province. He told me so many stories about my grandfather's travels.
And you're an architectus.
Yes, sir. My father encouraged me to learn a skill to better myself. The centurion and camp prefect saw I was good with measurements and I could read, so he attached me to the legion's architectus to train up.
You must have been a good student. I've seen your work, your bridges, and the work you did rebuilding this fortress in stone. Anyway, to business. Tell me about the north of Britannia. You grew up there, and you have your grandson's notes. I have enough hearsay, and even the reports Agricola sent to the one we will not name, but none of them have the level of detail I require. I hope your maps meet the level of detail I expect.
Yes, sir. As you can see, sir, there's only the northwest mountains which remain unexplored, and the main transport routes, both by land and sea.
Yet nothing worthy of the costs of such an enterprise was located. I'm not in the business of conquest for conquest's sake. I wish to establish and consolidate manageable boundaries to my domain. I will not squander our resources on miserable barbarians who will add nothing of value to the empire. Britannia sends gold, silver, copper, lead, grain, hunting dogs, excellent woolen cloaks, and slaves of dubious quality and temperament to Rome. All these can be obtained equally well elsewhere. Yet it still takes 3 entire legions and a similar number of auxiliary troops to keep it under control. Neither am I blind to the recent unrest in the north.
Were to abandon the province?
The dignity of Rome would not allow such a thing, but neither can I ignore the endless drain on our resources. The Ninth are now so badly undermanned and demoralised that I'll likely have to replace them with a less jaded legion.
Is the Eighth to be that legion? Is that why I'm here?
I've yet to decide on that matter. Your eagle never ventured across the narrow sea. Yet I recall cohorts joined the divine Vespasian when he was Legio during the invasion. Indeed, your prowess in battle was a little too great for Vespasian, at the expense of his own second. And I gather that's why you've been stuck like an anchor on the Rhine ever since, with no more honours added to your name. There may yet be opportunities for you, but first I need to know about the north of Britannia. What is Rome and what is not? Where civilization ends and barbarity begins, there I will draw a line to separate the Romans from the barbarians.
The lands in the north are more mountainous than further south, but there's plenty of resources to be found. There's coal and clay on the east, plenty of sandstone, limestone and slate for building works. As you said previously, there's gold, lead, silver, copper and zinc in these hills here, and also ironstone and a gemstone they call jet, found in the hills just off the map here. Caledonia is mostly unexplored mountains, with low-lying farmland down the east side, occupied by the tribes who are eager for Rome's protection. Most of what we know comes from reports from the troops that were stationed in the camps that were established by Agricola here on the ridge to protect the farmland from the Highland tribes. What we know of the coast comes from accounts when Agricola's fleet sailed around the island. The east is mostly low-lying with mountains inland. Once around the headland, the coastline gives way to huge cliffs with steep inlets and sharp rocks that are exposed to the full fury of these northern seas. The rugged coastline continues down the west side, in addition to many, if not hundreds, of islands, populated by primitive hostiles who even our native guides couldn't communicate with. The only real positive from the voyage was confirming that Britain is indeed an island, with Hibernia laying to the west, which can be seen on good clear days. My grandfather, let's just find his report, said that when the troops moved inland during the summer, just bear with me, said they were plagued by an incessant and irritable biting insect that targeted livestock and men en masse.
Like the swamps in Italy.
Yeah. The tribes in the north are a little better. They rely on livestock, fishing, and raiding the neighbouring tribes in order to survive. The rivers and the waters around the coastline are rich with fish. They're tough people, tough and hostile to Rome.
You said that some tribes were eager to receive Rome's embrace. Where was this?
That was these lands here, sir, in the low-lying farmland. I think when my grandfather said eager, it wasn't the correct terminology. They didn't mean they were happy for Rome's protection with the placement of these forts to halt the Highland tribes raiding their lands, but they were highly resistant to provisioning the legions that provided this protection.
So, there was little to recommend the far north, with its dark winters, rough seas, biting insects and outlandish predators.
No, sir.
Continue.
This part of the island here is the narrowest on the entire island, between the estuary of the Bodicha River in the east and the Clotter in the west. No more than, well, about 30 to 40 miles at its narrowest. There were rumours that gold was traded by boat up this large inland lake, but it was never followed up because of the warring tribes and how they were hostile to Rome here. And perhaps it was not sufficient enough for the governor to deploy necessary forces.
A prudent man, ahead of his time in many respects. These coasts are too exposed, especially in the west side, to prevent incursions from across the sea. Furthermore, reports suggest that for at least half the year, the seas are too rough to guarantee sufficient supplies being landed. What about the roads that Agricola began?
They're little more than marks on the map, even in summer, and they're regularly blocked by snow during the winter.
So, with the weather against us for at least half the year, and the Selgovae and Levante tribes being hostile, lines of communication and provision of supplies will be difficult, with little in the way of resources that aren't just as bountiful further south.
So, Agricola's line between Lugo Valley and Coria would be the next option. Excuse me, sir. Yes, on the east, the River Tinia is navigable as far as the old supply base in Coria, which lies on the road between Iberacum and Caledonia. Just beyond Coria, the river forks. One branch heads north and cuts through the high ground, but the southern branch continues west for another 20 miles before it turns south into the hills and through the lands of the Tecto Verde to the fort at Epiacum. These hills are rich with lead and silver deposits. On the west side, the River Ituna is navigable all the way from the coast to the fort at Lugovalium. A branch of that river, the River Ara, heads east, almost to where it meets the Tinia, before it turns north and cuts through the high ground also. The road between Coria and Lugovalium cuts through this gap between the two rivers, with the Fort Magnus blocking that gap. The rivers give obviously plentiful supply of water for the horses and the men, and a good line of natural defence, as Agricola saw clearly.
Good for transportation of bulk supplies by river, with better roads and closer to the legionary forts of Iberacum and Diwa. The western seas are more sheltered here by Hibernia. So, movement of supplies up the coast from Diwa should be possible all year round. What's this lake here? It seems to drain into the estuary.
I believe this river to be navigable into this lake, but the mountains close around this marching camp at the north end, which is why the road north takes this route.
Nonetheless, a good strong point from which to impose order in the region. I will think further on this. What of the estuary and surroundings? How do the local tribes conduct themselves?
I know little of the land to the north, except for what can be seen from the southern shore, and that they belong to the lands of the Novante. These lands, to the south, the lands of the Calvetti. I once went there with my father on a trading trip. They sell glass enamelled bronze items. They're known as the stag people, perhaps for wearing deer skins when they go hunting for wildfowl in the marshes. They ride small ponies, and they know the secret trails through the marshes, and also where it's possible to cross the estuary at low tide and access the lands to the north. They seem civilised people, and are quite friendly to Rome. I mean, they trade with us regularly, but they consider stealing livestock and raiding as sport. Obviously, using those same passages across the estuary to raid the lands to the north. In turn, the Novante use these same roads, so these same tracks across the estuary to raid the lands to the south. There is this route which heads to the southwest on the high ground here. We have made some use of it, and it gives a view of the entire estuary.
Cavalry should be sufficient to look out over the area, with the addition of suitable forts. A solid earthwork to control movement, would that be possible over the marshes?
It would have to be made from timber and turf, which there's plenty of in that area. I mean, that's not an issue. But it would have to be continually maintained. It's the only way to build across the marshes, anything of significance.
And if I were to require this barrier to extend further, what about the ground to the east of Lugavalium?
It's better. It's better ground. It's better ground for the most part, on a bedrock of sandstone and limestone further east. Building a structure is not the issue, it's maintaining it. That's why we build our permanent forts in stone. True, it makes a statement, but in the long run it's just far easier than having to come back and rebuild it every 10 years.
A statement? I like that. Here is Rome, enter at our pleasure, and pay your imperial taxes if you wish to trade and enjoy the benefits of the Roman peace. Could such a wall be built of stone right across the island?
It's possible. I would suggest such a wall would be better being built to the north of the River Ara and the River Tinia, taking advantage of the high ground. There's also fewer rivers and major valleys to cross. There's also a ridge here which commands the heights. There's plenty of good limestone in these ridges for building too.
Clearly your presence here was ordained by Fortuna. You're with the 6th cohort, aren't you?
Yes, sir. Missimus Lupus century.
Yet I would have thought with your credentials you would have been the first.
I prefer being involved on proper engineering jobs rather than pretending to and being stuck in HQ on menial jobs. No offence, sir.
Ah, yes. Where the eagle resides, there resides the Legion. Vespasian's little joke grows stale. But you're a restless spirit, an adventurer, I can see. Very good. My scribe will arrange for your maps to be returned to you. You have my assurances. That will be all for now.
Sir.
Viele, Butter!